do that. They can't put a drug out there that doesn't work because people won't buy it. It'll be recognized and won't get approved by the FDA. So accountability is a key part of good science. And oftentimes what you see in government-funded science, you don't see that critical accountability that you get in free markets.
You mean like shrimp on treadmills and things like that? I mean, because I understand they say, well, that's only a tiny part of science, when there were some scientists who literally put underwater shrimp on treadmills and had them run on the treadmills. And you say, that's not science. That's something a high school sophomore might try with his buddies in an aquarium at home, but certainly not science. But hey, it's interesting, so why not pay for it?
Shrimp on treadmill was my nickname when I ran cross country in high school, but you're absolutely right. Those sorts of things can be frivolous, and if there aren't feedbacks, and if there isn't, a link to usability, like there is in the free market, then you can get a lot of research that costs a lot but doesn't deliver very much.
And probably takes away the public's good opinion of science to begin with. That's Todd Myers, the Environmental Director of the Washington Policy Center. Todd, thanks very much.
You're listening to the best of the Lars Larson Show. The Lars Larson Show. From the Thomas Cattle Company studios, traffic outbound on the connector looking good. A nice light commute for you. Same thing on the freeway eastbound 84 going into Canyon County. Working an accident East Karcher and Norco Way in Canyon County. It's the ultimate Dennis Dillon Nissan sale with up to $7,000 off new Nissans. Drive a new Nissan Kicks, Altima, or Pathfinder and get 0% financing up to 72 months on their entire inventory. Dennis Dillon Nissan, 8727.
This is Kevin Miller with the Miller Minute on K.I.D.O Talk Radio. We don't talk about sports, but sports is such a grand distraction. For me, potato chips and college football, those are the grand distractions in my life. I don't need to go see the Tetons. I don't need to go to Yellowstone. I don't even need to go to Hawaii. What I need are chips and college football. And it's a shame that college football has decided to jump into the money game. And many people say, well, Kevin Miller, we're not paying the athletes. Well, we're paying the athletes now. Now it's time to have the tough decisions about college football and college in general. If college football and universities are just stepping stones for pro athletes, then it's time to tax them. It's time to eliminate their nonprofit status. If you're making $300,000, then you should be taxed and pay those taxes like the taxpayers who pay for the universities for you to play at. Very simple. It's called accountability. Who's with me? Kevin Miller, K.I.D.O Talk Radio.
I think you need to really get your weight down and get it down fast. If you're in your 50s, it's dangerous to be that heavy.
Hank, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Kevin Miller.
We wouldn't be able to replace you. Because these tendon-head liberals, and it'd be very difficult in the valley to get a counterpoint if you suddenly had a health crisis where you could no longer do your job.
Early mornings, 5 a.m. to 10 a.m.
I hope that you'll be able to do that. We need you in the valley.
K.I.D.O Talk Radio, 107.5 FM and 580 AM. Idaho's talk station is K.I.D.O Napa, K298CN, Boise, Kevin Miller Mornings, Clay and Bucket 10, the Town Square Media Station.
President. I'm Tom Graham, Fox News. Jimmy Carter's body will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol beginning January 7th. His official funeral will be on the 9th at the National Cathedral. Fox's Steve.
Speed check reported ahead on I-84 West.
We've heard praise from world leaders throughout the day, but also ordinary people coming up here to the Carter Center to lay flowers and pay their respects. We asked some of them what Jimmy Carter meant to them.
He eradicated diseases. He built houses for folks that needed a house. We have a terrible homeless housing situation in Atlanta, in Georgia, in the United States. If everybody did what he did, maybe we wouldn't have that problem.
Former President Obama said Jimmy Carter could teach people how to live with grace. Former President Bush said Carter's work with Habitat Humanity would continue to inspire generations of Americans.
Carter was 100 years old. More than 40 tornadoes were reported, several homes destroyed. This man says the community of McCall Creek, Mississippi has come together in the aftermath.
It kind of overwhelms you, so you need to food to poor, and I've had people that come by and offer to bring equipment.
4 people killed after the twister outbreak from Texas to the Carolinas. An estimated 1 million revelers expected to pack New York City's Times Square to ring in the new year. Preparations are underway at tomorrow night's event.
The NYPD shared today that they are ready for this. They're sparing no expense. They got the drones in the sky. They have teams on the ground as well. And the NYPD Commissioner, Jessica Tisch, said they're ready for protesters, including those of the Israel-Hamas war. Listen to this.
We have been operating in a heightened threat environment since October 7th, and we remain vigilant.
So New York State Police, National Guard, and the New York Homeland Security team will all be working together tomorrow night.
Fox's Nate Foy in Times Square. America's listening to Fox News.
So right now may be the perfect time for you to rethink how you pay for health care. And here's why. This time of year is decision time for a lot of people, but it's also when you can join MediShare and save even more than usual. For many families, joining MediShare means saving about $500 a month, which is a game changer for a lot of people, obviously. But what's more, MediShare members like it a lot. Their satisfaction rate is 98%. Imagine that. And MediShare is a proven thing, too. For over 30 years, it's a Christian community of hundreds of thousands of people now. And here's the thing. If you join before December 31st and you mention the promo code SHARE, they'll waive your application fee, so you save even more right off the bat. I'll give you the number here in a second, but just call and you'll get a price within 2 minutes. And again, the deadline is December 31st. So call now and you'll save even more. Here's the number, 866-89-BIBLE. That's 866-89-BIBLE. 866-89-BIBLE.
The U.S. Treasury Department says it was hacked by a state-sponsored Chinese actor.
Treasury Department officials say they were notified of the Chinese hack by a software service company called Beyond Trust. Treasury told lawmakers in the letter that a hacker got a security key that gave them remote access to certain Treasury Department workstations and documents. Lawmakers were told the hack is attributed to a China state-sponsored Advanced Persistent Threat Actor. Separately, the Biden administration's Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technologies said over the weekend that a ninth telecommunications company was hit in the massive Chinese Salt Typhoon hack that included Verizon and AT&T. Some reports indicate officials believe communications of some high-level senior government officials were accessed in this hack. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
179 people are dead after a plane crash in South Korea. Only 2 crew members survived. An investigation into the cause of the tragedy is under investigation. The Boeing plane's landing gear was reportedly still up during the landing. A federal judge telling former Senator Bob Menendez his sentencing next month will not be delayed.
U.S. District Judge Sidney Stein denied the defense's request to push back ex-Senator Menendez's sentencing. It will be handed down as scheduled on January 29th. Menendez's lawyers were concerned their client's punishment could have an effect on any jury hearing his wife Nadine's case. Her trial was scheduled to start January 21st, but Judge Stein delayed.
Speed check reported ahead on I-84 West.
Nadine Menendez is facing fraud and bribery charges, as her husband did. Lawyers argued having Menendez sentenced during his wife's trial would also take an emotional toll on both. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
On Wall Street, stocks finishing in the red on the second to last day of the year. Well, the Dow falling 418 points, NASDAQ giving up 235, S&P 500 dropping 64. I'm Tom Graham, and this is Fox News.
K.I.D.O Talk Radio. Hi folks, Dylan McCurry here with State Line Auto Range Subaru announcing the start of the Subaru Share the Love event. Starting now through January 2nd is the only time that you can get into a new Subaru, and State Line Auto Range will donate to a cause of your choosing during the 2024 Subaru Share the Love event. By the end of the year, Subaru and its retailers like State Line Auto Range Subaru will have donated $320 million to charities. Right now, drive home a new Crosstrek for 2.9% or an Outback for 0% interest, and we will donate to a charity on your behalf. Check out all the deals at StatelineAutoRangeSubaru.com or visit our showroom on the State Line just 35 minutes from Meridian. In the service department, every Subaru vehicle maintenance completed during the Share the Love event, State Line Auto Range Subaru will donate $5 to our hometown charity of Malheur County Meals on Wheels. Help a family get hot meals during the holiday season and schedule your service appointment today at StatelineAutoRangeSubaru.com or visit the coziest service drive in the valley at State Line Auto Range Subaru in Fruitland, Idaho.
All financing for qualified buyers on approved credit.
Wheel Radio. Lars Larson Show.
I am asking you to be excited.
Honestly provocative talk radio.
It's never too early to learn that the government is a greedy piglet that suckles on a taxpayer's teeth until they have sore, chapped nipples.
President Trump is one fat-ass president. He secured the border at a level we never seen before.
Now, here's your host,
Wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please.
Lars Larson. You're listening to the best of the Lars Larson Show.
Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm always glad to get your phone calls and emails, and I'll do that in just a moment. But you know all these calls for so-called prison reform? When they say prison reform, they get suspicious anytime they use the R word, because reform just means change, and usually it's in one direction. And some people are arguing that we ought to raise the threshold for felony theft so that we can ease what they call overcrowding of prisons. Never understood that term either. Prisons are either crowded or they're not. I don't know what overcrowding is. But I thought we'd talk about it with Zach Smith, who's a legal fellow at Heritage and co-author with Cully Simpson of the new book, Rogue Prosecutors, How Radical Soros Lawyers Are Destroying America's Communities. Although, Zach, I guess congratulations are in order, because the bad guy from Beauty and the Beast, Gascon, has lost in Los Angeles from what I hear.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Lars. And look, the citizens of Los Angeles are in a much, much better position today than they were this time last week when George Gascon was still the district attorney. And I think in large part, the reason Gascon and others like him, like Chase Boudin in San Francisco, the reason voters, even in the left-leaning cities, kicked these individuals out of office is because they recognized their soft-on-crime policies were working, and everyone, regardless of whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, what have you, everyone wants to feel safe in their own homes and their own communities, and it was clear that George Gascon cared more about criminals than he did about the victims and the other citizens there in Los Angeles County.
So tell me, this proposal to raise the threshold for felony theft is because of inflation? I mean, why don't we just say it's illegal to steal things, and yeah, there's maybe a distinction between a pack of gum or stealing, a TV, but why are they down to arguing about what the dollar threshold is? But does that make any sense to you? Maybe it does.
No, it really doesn't, Lars. Look, and I think it's important to keep in mind, many of these threshold levels are quite high, $1,000 or more, and I hardly consider that to be petty theft. But essentially, the goal is to reduce the prison population as much as possible. And unfortunately, what we've seen in many jurisdictions where this felony theft threshold has been raised is that if it's raised to $1,000, $1,500, you'll see criminals repeatedly going in and stealing just below that amount, $990, $1,499 if it's a $1,500 threshold. So for all their flaws, criminals aren't stupid. They understand the incentives that are being given to them, and they respond accordingly. And if you say that theft up to a certain level won't be punished that harshly, well, guess what? You're going to get more theft right up to that level.
Well, and in fact, does reducing prison populations actually produce a benefit in the long term? I understand the short term, the bad guy gets out of custody sooner, but does it actually produce more law-abiding people?
No, it doesn't. But look, what's happening with this raise the threshold initiative is actually more perverse than that, Lars, because essentially what they're saying is we'll raise the threshold, the dollar amount required for something to be a felony, and everything below that amount will be a misdemeanor. Well, what's been happening in cities like Los Angeles with George Gascon, San Francisco with Jason Boudin, Portland with Mike Schmidt, and other jurisdictions is many of these rogue prosecutors have said, guess what? We're not going to prosecute most misdemeanor offenses. And so what most people don't realize, if they don't connect those two very important dots, they don't realize that when these thresholds are being raised, many more offenses are now misdemeanors, and those misdemeanors are not being prosecuted. And so you've essentially, again, given a very big green light to criminals to go forward and commit even more crimes.
In fact, Zach, I'm tempted to use one of their own arguments against them, because we get this argument of the school to prison pipeline, or the this to prison pipeline. Everything's a pipeline to prison. I would think the pipeline to prison would be, because most of the criminals I've ever covered in my life, they didn't start with the big stuff. they started with the little stuff and they worked their way up. Now, you know more about the subject, but if you say we start out with a guy who was shoplifting as a kid, and then as a young adult he steals a car, he has other thefts, and then eventually he thinks this isn't producing enough, I'm going to start forging checks, or I'm going to start doing other crimes. Right. I don't know how many criminals actually start with the $100,000 crimes or the $10,000 crimes. I'm willing to bet that most of them started small, worked their way up, and that when you say we're going to have a larger window for misdemeanors that aren't going to be prosecuted at all, you're creating a pipeline because you're saying, you young criminals, we're not going to do anything to you till you know your trade really well, and you're pulling off the really big jobs.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And look, it's common sense that if you intervene early and provide consequences when someone is very young and they break the law, that behavior is likely to stop and it's likely to change. And there's actually studies that show that is in fact the case. And so what's often peddled as being kind of this, touchy-feely, feel-good type rhetoric, we shouldn't criminalize young adults, we shouldn't criminalize juvenile behavior, kids are kids, it's actually doing more harm to those individuals than it is providing help to them. And again, I think what you're seeing is even voters in many of these left-leaning cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, New York, they're recognizing the problematic consequences that are flowing from not holding offenders accountable. And look, holding offenders accountable doesn't mean that the first time someone steals a Coca-Cola from a vending machine or a pack of gum, that they're going to go to prison for 20 years. That's not what anybody's saying. But what we are saying is there needs to be consequences when someone steals, when someone breaks the law. And I suspect that's why you saw voters in California just this past election cycle overwhelmingly approve by almost 70% margins something called Proposition 36, which would in fact increase penalties for repeat offenders, people who repeatedly go in and steal items, people who repeatedly violate California's drug laws. And the fact that voters passed that so overwhelmingly shows that common sense can still prevail when people recognize that, again, crime has to have consequences at the end of the day.
And by the way, I'm talking to Zach Smith. He wrote, along with Cully Simpson, Rogue Prosecutors. But that's the thing. I keep being told I don't live in California. I did when I was a little kid. But they keep telling me California is a liberal state because they send nitwits, like Gavin Newsom to office or Nancy Pelosi and the like. But every time they voted on rent control. They said no by a 2/3 margin. They vote on crime, and they vote conservative. I mean, that tells me that for all that you may want to think of California as a big blue state, it seems when it comes to the actual practical application, the voters may not be as sensible when it comes to the personnel, but when it comes to the specific policies, they seem to be pretty darn sensible. Zach, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Lars.
That is Zach Smith, legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, co-author of Rogue Prosecutors, How Radical Soros Lawyers Are Destroying America's Communities. But if you notice, Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, out. Mike Schmidt in Portland, out. And, of course, George Gascon, I keep wanting to say the name like Beauty and the Beast, but George Gascon, out by the people in Los Angeles. They've decided they've had enough of the free and easy approach toward criminals. They're going to do something about it. 866-439-5277. You're listening to The Lars Larson Show.
You're listening to the best of The Lars Larson Show.